don't want to marry someone if I don't have a job first. The man comes asking me, running out, no, I don't want to marry you yet. I want to have a job. And if he says, I will not come back to you, fine, I'll find a different man. This is my life. You better stop caring. I'm not going to do anything for you until I have my job. I don't care if I marry you. I don't care if I marry another man. I care if I do something that's special. I don't want to marry someone if I don't have a job first.
So we're gonna launch out today with besides a video clip, we're gonna launch out with a discussion question. And I need somebody, Cece, can you run that mic? And so if you're not accustomed to this, she'll run the mic around and you'll make a comment in regard to this question. And so she's a real fast runner. She's got her special mountain sandals on tonight. So the question is, do you think that it's a good idea or a bad idea to use an internet matchmaking service? Why or why not?
My aunt used to catfish people using an online dating service, so no.
I would say no, and to piggyback on that, there's a lot of fish out in the sea, but a lot of them are catfish. And the rest are piranhas.
Ooh.
I wouldn't say that it's like a horrible, it's never gonna work out kind of idea, but I wouldn't say that's the best idea either. I think you should be safe on the internet, and I think that if you were to do it, personally, it would be better to just be friends with everybody that you meet online, and over time, maybe if you really get to know them, that's where
I think it's wiser not to use internet matchmaking services, but I have known some people, my mom and stepdad, who met through an internet matchmaking service. So I think it does work for very few people, but I think they both have to be very solid Christians. And
I saw Madeline moving her head like there was a real reaction. You want to talk to us about it? Your body language was betraying you. Cece, go.
Well, just like anything on the internet, it's probably a scam.
Ooh, I'll have to tell my son Nathan that his wife is a scam.
So I'd say when you're younger, no go. You've got way too many opportunities to meet people in healthy environments like church or school or some other place where you get to know people. If you mess up later on in life when you're older, it's kind of frustrating because it's hard to find people. And nowadays, if you try to talk to someone in the supermarket, I haven't seen your profile, I haven't seen your Facebook, get away from me, mass murderer. So, this has kind of become the norm in some ways. But when you're younger, no. If you're older, maybe.
Anyone else? Kaya's raising her hand. She had the most striking comments last week. I can't wait.
Okay, my opinion on this one doesn't actually come from experience, so don't get too excited.
This one's not from personal experience, whereas last week was. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we can have story time later if you really want to. Anyways, so I don't know, at least in the Christian world, I've been on websites where it's people asking for advice. Sometimes I chime in. And a lot of them, it reeks of desperation. A lot of these people, they're very young people that have a lot of life ahead of them, and they're just so desperate to settle down with somebody. It's just no. And also it gives me pause when, okay, I'm gonna go off on Christian Mingle here a little. It's okay. I was looking through their testimonials, and all of them were people that met, decided they were in love, engaged, and were married within a year and a half. And that's fast, man.
That's real fast.
Okay. Anybody else?
Marsha.
All right. Marcia has a word of wisdom for us. Help us, Marcia.
I think, like anything, God can use it, but you obviously have to be very careful and you have to go with His leading. If you're going to say, oh, God can use this, then make sure that you're praying about it, that you're following peace, and that your heart is in the right place going into it.
Okay. So I see you're sitting next to Madeline. Do y'all get along? I'm just messing with you. Okay. All right. Those are great comments. But you're sitting farther apart now. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So when we talk about, we've really laid a lot of foundation. We've covered a lot of ground. This is part 5. And the basis for true, deep, and long-lasting love comes from our love for God. I mean, why would people be trying to originate family without the author of family? Why would people be trying to build a marriage and a family when God is the one who designed it? And so there's a scripture in Ecclesiastes that says a threefold cord is not readily broken. It's kind of a mystical statement. But the idea is if you have rope and you've put 3 strands together, it's much stronger than if you just had 2 strands together. And the idea is, what is the mystical third strand? Well, the mystical third strand is God Himself in the midst of that family, in the midst of that marriage. And so, are y'all paying attention over there? A lot of activity in the back row there. I want to make sure everybody's focused. I don't want to get distracted by seeing everybody talking to each other and passing things around. So I'm going to give you a quote. This is from a book called Outlasting the Gay Revolution by Michael Brown, PhD. He says, one of my colleagues who has conducted extensive marital and sexual counseling sessions stated that he frequently deals with married couples in their 20s who have sexless relationships. The reason being that they got so burned out on sexual promiscuity in high school and college that they lost interest in sex altogether. Another counselor, experienced sexual addiction counselor, told me that young men today often need Viagra to perform sexually because they have become so absorbed with pornography that they are not aroused by real sexual romantic relationships. Therein lies the modern world and what we're dealing with today. And there's a lot of really messed up people that are immersed on the internet and their head gets messed up. So the damage is done. The damage is great. And it's men and women. It's more men than women, but it is a big problem. And I've seen it for years that when I hear and I'm counseling or talking to a married couple and I find out that they're sexless, meaning they have no sexual interaction, it's very rare. In nearly every case that I can think of where that was happening, the marriage ends. Is it symptomatic of an already bad marriage, or is it part of the reason that there's a bad marriage? And there's a lot of reasons that people end up in that situation, but it's very serious. And so all this, when we talk about a framework of history and who an individual is, we're talking about kind of a grid of character tests that you should use when you're going to consider somebody or date somebody in the future. And by the way, if you're not in a season for marriage, why would you be dating at all? What's the point? And that's where defrauding relationships come in. You start something when you're not able to fulfill it and be right about it. And so all you do is create a bag of worms, which is a lot of temptation, a lot of compromise, a lot of boundaries that get pushed too far. And you end up with people that are very kind of ripped apart in the end. Every relationship that comes together, and I related this early in the series, it only has 2 outcomes. Either, I'm talking about where, a guy and a girl come together and they begin a relationship. It either ends in marriage or a breakup. It's one or the other. But a lot of young people just barrel into this relationship without any thought, knowing that they're not in the season of marriage, but yet they just want to have this relationship. They just want the romance. They just don't want to be alone anymore. They have all these conflicting motives. But the fact is, they're often not considering where the outcome is. Where is this taking us? And the fact is that it's taking you one of two places. Either to a breakup, which is going to hurt terribly, it always hurts. Even if you've kept a lot of the boundaries in place. If you don't have boundaries, then it'll hurt even more, many times more. Or it will end in marriage. It's one or the other. And I can't tell you how many times I have conversations with people and I say, well, we don't think necessarily we're appropriate for marriage, but we can't see breaking up either. I'm like, well, then what's the point? What are we doing here? Well, sometimes we're trying to avoid the inevitable breakup and trying to avoid the inevitable pain that comes with that. And so then how many times I've had the conversation where somebody has said, well, we know that we're really not where we should be and we don't like where this is headed, so we're going to try to be friends. I can tell you right now, you can't just all of a sudden go, okay, we're friends now. As human beings, we're very complicated. And there's a lot of dynamics here. And it's not like you can just suddenly, we're in drive and we're in our car and all of a sudden we're going to put it in reverse. Or put it in neutral and think we're going anywhere. So I don't know that I've seen many cases, and it can happen. It is very rare, but the only way it happens, if you can ratchet it back down to a friendship, is if it was more like a friendship to begin with. Then maybe it's not a big jump. So we looked at 12 steps of intimacy last week. A process of bonding. And what we learned was, from the PhDs that analyzed this, is that if you skip those steps and you go to number 4 when you should be at number 2, or you go to number 7 when you should be at number 3, and you skip these steps and you've accelerated the process, that process of bonding that's taking place by taking the appropriate steps over the appropriate amount of time leads to the type of strong bond that you want to see in a marriage. If you jump around and don't follow at least a sequence and a sense of patience in the process of that relationship, then you jeopardize the bonding process that really makes a marriage strong. So we've looked at a lot of principles. Design, the principle of design that, I've already referred to these a little bit. Temple, that means that God is for purity. And all of us need to be committed to purity. And it's a lifetime battle to find, that place where you want to walk in a way that's pleasing to the Lord. Not defrauding. I just gave you an example where you start a relationship too young, where it's out of season, it's the inappropriate time. You can't fulfill it in marriage and be right. And then the principle of possession. People take possession of each other way early, really quick, and that leads to jealousy and all kinds of other dynamics that are really unhealthy. And then we began to look at how to discern God's will concerning the person of your future. And so we looked at, essentially set up a grid, if you will, kind of a screening process. What do you look for in another individual? Now the problem is that once hormones and attractions and the desire of romance, it's in the air, and you begin that process, it's very difficult to step back and go, okay, now wait a minute, I need to look at 10 criteria. They're Bible criteria, and our pastor taught on this, for a while, and so just hold on, let me size you up. Here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number 3. I'll tell honestly, if more people would do this, it would just avoid a whole lot of mess. See, a lot of times people go, well, I'm discerning it's God's will. But yet they're not following principle. They're ignoring every red flag in the book because they become vested emotionally. So what were those screening characteristics? One is the individual needs to share your faith. You need to have a common faith. If that is not there, then you're unequally yoked. Do they have a clear conscience? Are they honest? Do they steal? Do they cheat? Do they lie? What is their attitude towards authority? In other words, with that comes also, do they do what they say they're going to do? You know how many people just say stuff and give out promises and tell people they're going to do this or that and it never happens? Do they have a clear conscience? What is their attitude towards authority? What is their attitude toward their parents? Even if they're out of their house, even if they're young professionals at this point. Number 4, are they a part of a healthy community? Do they have a relationship with a local church body? And with that is a built-in accountability. So what Sarah was talking about when she was saying the experience she had going to Big Bend was it introduced her into an environment of healthy Christian community, which cultivated the ground for her to grow. And she's grown wonderfully, and it's not just the community, but she was rich soil, and in that environment, she's like matriarchal now in this church, in our fellowship, as one of our top leaders. Has the individual yielded their rights to God? Is their life about following and serving Him, or is it still all about them? Is your life purpose clear? Well, I'm working on it. Well, a lot of us took a while to work on it, but at some point, your life purpose needs to come into focus. If you're talking about getting married and settling down, what is your life purpose? Has this kind of been worked out? Are they a provider? Do they work hard? Do they have a path? Do they have a plan to provide? Could ladies, if you're considering a young man, do they have the means? Do they have a path? Do they have a plan to provide for a family someday? How much do you think it takes to provide for a family of 5? Let's say you have 3 kids. Certainly you don't want to have just 2. I mean, we've got to survive as a civilization. It takes 2.2 to sustain the civilization, so at least 3. Okay, as Christians, we need to have kids. So let's just say a family of 5, and you want to live comfortably. You want to have a nice middle-class home, and you want to provide for those kids. Maybe you want them to have private education. Maybe you have a lot of things you'd like to do. Let me just throw out, we'll run the mic on this one. Tell me how much you think let's just say you're a man and you have to provide, and she's going to stay at home and raise those kids. Just tell me how much you think you need to earn to provide for that family. So give me some numbers.
To live comfortably, probably about $150,000 a year.
Ooh, comfortably, okay. Okay, keep going. Let's hear it. I want to hear your perspective.
From a family of 6, the Lord provides always. So we did it with less, but comfortably 80 to 100K minimum.
Is what you would say. Okay, keep going.
My mom did it on 42.
Well, how many years ago?
This lasted about 10 years.
Okay, so 10 years ago.
In school still.
All right, I want you to inflation adjust that. If we're looking at 10 to 15 years, what is that 42 now?
Before the economy collapsed twice.
Yeah, it's quite a bit more since then. And I'll bet she was really frugal and had to be really tight.
Not terribly.
Not really? Okay. It's probably...
We were from a very small rural town in the middle of West Texas, so not much was expensive there.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, that figure now would probably need to be probably closer to 55 to make it equate to 15 years ago, say. Okay, someone else?
So I'd say right now, 175,000. Next year, like 250, because bacon's going up like 19%. So we'll see.
With the current government policy, it might go from 80 to 150 next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Keep printing money. You know, if you keep printing money out the wazoo, you realize what happens. It devalues the dollar, and it creates inflation. It's not rocket science, and that's the way the government steals from the people. We give you all money. We gave you all tax cuts. We've all taken care of. We've handed you out lots of money for COVID last year. But you know what? We're getting it all back through inflationary spending. So the government creates money by fiat, and then we start paying more for everything. And so just in case you didn't know the dirty little secret I just told you. Okay, so.
I think $80,000 is fine.
Okay. Okay. So family of 5, 80,000. Some of y'all were in the range, 150, 75 to 80 to 100. You know, y'all aren't too far off, really. I would say a family of 5 at 70 would feel very tight, would feel very restricted and very limited, and would feel like their budget's just always on the edge. I know that may seem hard to believe. 85, 90 to 100 would probably be more appropriate for a family of 5. And the reason I want you to know this, I want you to understand from a reality, this is today's dollars, not tomorrow's dollars. And I want you to know this because whatever your plan is right now, how are you going to, if you're, planning to develop and establish a more traditional family, what is your plan to be able to make that kind of money in the next 5 years? And by then it will be a lot higher with inflation, right? So I just want you to think about that, because a lot of people do not want to grasp the reality. They're just going to keep doing some menial job and think that somehow it'll all happen. But you need a plan. And there are a lot of career paths which can provide those numbers. A lot of families cannot meet those numbers without both parents working. And it's not because they want to both work, it's because they have to both work to survive and to reach those thresholds of numbers. And that can be really hard on a family too, to not have at least a few years where you can have somebody focused on the kids. Especially nowadays when people want to homeschool more and more and more, how is that going to happen unless there's somebody that's able to earn more money? So that was for free. That wasn't even in my notes. So what was I doing? I was going through the screening grid. Is your life purpose clear? Are they a good provider? Do they have self-acceptance? Do they have a healthy sense of self-esteem? Do they have a proven track record? In other words, do you know anything about them and where they've been and what they've been doing? All that is important, not like the song, I don't care where you've been or what you've done, as long as you love me. Okay, now, new believer, or are they still in process? So with this, when we're talking about, I'm going to change gears a little bit, and with this clip, we'll change gears.
How you doing?
What's going on?
I just was in the neighborhood, got off work a little early, thought maybe you wanted to go get a bite to eat or something.
Oh, that's very sweet. What a nice surprise. Mwah.
Oh, shoot. I forgot to change my shoes.
That's okay. You don't have to change. You know I can't resist a man in nurse's shoes.
I know, but I got my sneakers in my backpack. I'm just gonna change. It'll just take a second.
Okay.
Honey?
Hmm?
Pam,
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too. Come on, sweetie. Got a half hour before I have to be back. So, you want to go have lunch? What are you doing?
I'm nothing. I just love you so much. These last 10 months have been the happiest of my life.
Yeah, they've been amazing. What's going on?
Nothing. I just feel like, we're so close. You're my best friend, and you're also the woman that I love. And
Are you okay, sweetie? You're acting so weird.
I'm fine. I just got a crick in my neck. I was doing CPR on a 300-pound crack addict this morning.
Do you want me to massage your neck or something? Do you need
No,
a
no, no,
background?
I'm
Are
fine.
you sure?
I'm good. Honey, look, your kids. They're trying to tell you something.
What?
Look.
Oh, hold on. Oh, it's my sister. Hello? Hi. You're engaged? That's wonderful. Congratulations. Oh my God, you're getting married in 2 weeks. It's a little soon, isn't it? Wow, Mom and Dad really don't know Bob very well. Dad was okay with this? Wow, that was very thoughtful of him. I can't believe he knew to ask Dad's permission. Yeah. No, I'm just here with Craig. He's gonna take me out for lunch. He's okay. Okay, I know you gotta go. All right, I love you. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
So what's going on? What, Debbie's marrying that guy?
Yeah, in 2 weeks. Dr. Bob of Denver. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's didn't they just meet like a few months ago?
Well, yeah, but, he asked her and she said yes. Actually, he asked my dad. He said yes, and then he asked Debbie.
Huh. Yeah, I overheard that. So what, like he had to ask his permission, or?
No, he didn't have to. Bob just understood that Dad appreciates that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want you to catch the part about how it was this rushed relationship. And what I want you to catch was the traditional view that you ask the father or you ask the parents oftentimes, and with broken families and blended families, it's a little more complicated than that. But what I want you to understand is that there is a process and the way to do this that's respectful to the parents in whatever construct they happen to be today. And you do the best you can. Sometimes it's not always very easy to do, but you do the best you can. And you try to go through channels in respect and allow them to have input. We talked about that some last week. Now, I want to talk about the seventh principle, which is a test of time. One of the things that people ask, and one of the things they struggle with, is what if I have to wait a long time? Sometimes people, if they're waiting a long time, and they perceive it may not be a long time, but their perception is it's a long time having to wait to meet somebody and settle down. And so they get anxious, and they get fearful, and they get insecure, and then they just want to settle it, and they do. It's what's called settling. You end up just finding anybody that will go through with this, and so you drop your standards, forget the 10 tests that we just put up, the character tests. So, but what if it's going to take a long time? And today we already looked at the fact that what is the average age for women today to get married? I think it was 28.2 or something, 0.1, and then for men it's 30 now. That's the average age or median age. And so that means that for a lot of people there's going to be a waiting period. So you could be 22 years old and have 7 or 8 more years, and you would be within you may feel like, oh my goodness, I'm 22 and I have 7 years to wait. Are you kidding me? What am I going to do with my life for the next 7 years? And so listen, so a lot of times people perceive that like, this is just like some sort of awful punishment. The fact is that people get married much later than they used to, but it's a reality of the culture that we live in, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But what are you going to do for the next, if you're 22, I'm betting if I did a mathematical average of everybody in this room right now, it would probably statistically come out to about 22. So it's a good age to throw out there. You might be 25 or 27 or 28 or whatever. You might be 17 or 16. So what if you're going to have to wait? I mean, you're just going to go through a chain of relationships? You're just going to experimentally date, wear yourself out with all these start and stop relationships? There's got to be a better way to do this, but you need to have a perception of God and how you trust Him when the timetable may not be what you think. And I understand how lonely people can feel and how almost deep need to want to settle down and meet somebody. And so if they become too needy, they also become too compromised too easily. So understanding timing is also part of God's will. It's not just, hey, I know she's the one, that's it. And when I met Jeanette, I was pretty sure she was the one. There was a process, and it took a little while. But the fact is, there was a point where I'm kind of like, she's the one, I know she's the one, I'm going for it. But I met with my dad first. And my dad had a lot of pushback. And I realized I may not be right in my timing. My dad wasn't a Christian, but I believe that God was using him to speak to me. And so I stepped back a minute and I said, okay, let me consider this. I need to pray about this. And so I held off another entire year because it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right appropriate season. And that was hard to do. And so I just maintained a friendship. She didn't know. She didn't know I talked to my dad. I didn't go cry on her shoulder and go, I talked to my dad, but he said no. And I hope you understand. Are you kidding me? You don't talk to her about that. And that's the way a lot of guys are. They're weak and they're whiny and they're needy and they're, well, let's kick the can down the road. What do you think about marriage? You think we ought to think about it? You think we ought to talk about it? You think we ought to, instead of doing it proper and take a risk and actually have an appropriate proposal and not even know for sure what she's going to say? Doesn't mean to be dumb and go around proposing to girls, thinking you might just hit, you might just get a hit. That's not what I'm saying. Just stop. Okay. Understanding the timing. It's not just knowing who it is. It's understanding the timing in God's plan. Knowing timing is just as much His will, discerning His will, as it is picking the right person. So passing this test is all about discerning the season. If you get too rushed, you miss things. If you're too clingy or too desperate or too needy, you miss things. In Genesis 29:20, it says, "So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and it seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her." Wow, 7 years. That's actually in the Bible. I mean, this is a real story. I mean, this really happened. And it's an interesting story. You can certainly go read it. But timing, there's a process. And I think that part of the timing has to do with getting to know this person, getting to know who they are, getting to know them in an informal context, which is great within a church. I've mentioned Big Bend is a great place to really find out what people are made of. And so I remember hearing, this is a true story. It was a long, long time ago, but I remember it really well because it struck me so. It's so absurd. There was a couple on the 700 Club. This was probably 20 years ago. And they were bragging about how they had found each other and God had picked them out. And he saw his wife one time and he proposed. And she said yes. And so now they're talking about how God did that, how it was His will and how He made that happen. And you would probably say, well, couldn't it have been God? Couldn't it have been that way? Couldn't it have been? And I'm saying, that's just stupid. Okay? And what's the hurry? Why wouldn't you just take some time to get to know who this person is? You hear the Lord, do you think those two people hear the Lord that well when they're probably just initially attracted to each other? Absolutely not. So what is the big hurry? Allow enough time to see things shake out. One of the big reasons that young marriages struggle is they come in with unrealistic expectations. And they can really hit hard that first 6 months of marriage, that first year of marriage, when they came in with all this idealism and they came in with, this is what, because they rushed in and they got married and they didn't really even know each other. So I'm going to show you a picture. So this is my Christian fellowship in college at SFA in, let's see if I did this right, Amanda. She gave me this fancy pointer. Oh no, it's not working. What did I do? All right, hang on. She's going to save me. Maybe I didn't. Blind somebody. Oh man, she's good. We have some really amazing people in our fellowship that are really gifts. And she's one of them. Okay, so if you'll look at this, it works. So I want to point out, this was our community, our Christian community, 1977. I know where most of these people are now. I know the outcome. I know what happened in their marriages or non-marriages or divorces or whatever they went through. Actually, most of them ended up in really good, solid marriages because their Christian experience was deep. It was coming out of the Jesus movement revival period, and people had real deep foundations in God. And so they made a lot of good decisions. But I want you to know, just from a reality standpoint, you see, let's see, like this girl right here. See how she's real cozy with that guy? They were engaged. These two were engaged, and they did not get married. And then he started liking her. And then he kind of liked her for one summer, but he was with her. Well, they had broke up. Actually, she died really young, but they were dating for like years. These two were dating for years and years and years, and they never got married. I'm wanting you to understand that what you think and how you think it's going to come out, how you think the outcome's going to unfold, you don't really know. Any more than these guys knew. These chumps had no idea how this is all going to pan out. So he ends up going to mission field in Argentina and marries an Argentine girl and lives in San Antonio now. But he did not marry her or her. Okay, so this guy here married her. This guy here married her. Her? That's me. I know you're like, who's that rough guy, bearded wonder? That's me. And so this guy ended up dating a girl, and I can't find her in the picture. Maybe she wasn't there at this retreat, but he ended up dropping her and married somebody else I don't even know, and he's now a surgeon, still a friend. And this guy ends up very much a part of the fellowship, and he ends up marrying a non-Christian and disappears off the face of the earth. Somebody did research and found out he must have gone back, I'm assuming he must have gone back into drugs because he died in his 40s. He had been supernaturally delivered off of LSD during the Jesus years. Let's see who else. This guy here was totally into her. I mean, I would see them at the library all the time playing with their fingers and their hands, and just all this sexual tension was just, you know. Anyway, he is a master musician. He ends up marrying her. What a web we weave. I could keep going. Should I keep going? Yes. What else can I show you? Okay, he actually did marry her. He married a non-prayer grouper. Let's see, who else? Jeanette, I don't see anybody that's really interesting. This man here that I keep talking about that had all these interests, that is Pastor Steve Corder from Windsor Park Assembly of God Church, my best friend and my roommate. So that's for free, okay? Let's see. Oh, here's one. This one had a thing for him, but it didn't last. Ended up marrying him, and that didn't last. And now she's running for U.S. Congress. I'm going to say that real quietly. And she's a friend, but she's running for a Republican seat up in North Texas. Let's see. A lot of these people really ended up having fabulous careers and great paths, and of course they're all college students. They're all getting their degrees and in all different types of fields, but we were pulled together because we all love Jesus together, and we wanted to grow, and we wanted to learn, and it was a student-led body of Christians. It grew from here. It actually became like twice as big. But I'm wanting you to see these relationships, because we will put so much stock in a crush, and we'll put so much hope in somebody we meet, or how it feels, or how this person, and the fact is that you don't really, and that's why you want to keep the sexual boundaries. That's why you don't want to jump that fence. Besides the fact that God just said, don't do it. And I can tell you, I think in almost all those cases, they were relatively pure. I only know of one situation in this entire group where I knew there was promiscuity. In the entire group. And that was quick, and it was over, and there was repentance. So what's the big hurry? What's our motivation? We motivated out of fear, insecurity, impatience, lack of self-control, the flesh. Why are we ignoring all the signals in the process and taking the time to really see this out? You're not going to want to hear this. Maybe you do. Maybe you really, I assume you're here because you want to hear the truth. Delayed gratification builds character. Honest truth. And we hate it. If my mom says, you can have half the cupcake now, but you can only have the other half after dinner or whatever. That's like torture. And she could say to me, honey, that's character building for you. I didn't like that. She said it to me all the time. This will be character building. I don't want to be building character. I just want what I want. Don't check your brain out, and don't ignore principle. develop convictions that are strong in the Lord and the fear of God, where you can build a foundation in which you can judge with some degree of reality and not just check your brain out when you start to fall for somebody or somebody falls for you. What if there is a delay? What if it's quite a few years? And what are you doing during that time? Are you just going to hang around and think, gosh, everybody else is getting married, but not me, and then just kind of get depressed? I'm telling you, I mean, people will get depressed. They will seriously feel like the ship has pulled out of the harbor, and, you know, I'm now a ripe old age of 24 years old, and it's over. Nobody wants me. Listen, if you live in that framework, nobody will want you, because you've become a victim, and it reeks. So I'm going to transition this into calling and hearing God's voice. So now what do I do? What if I don't get married until I'm 30 years old? I know that's unthinkable to some of y'all, but what if it happens? Are you just in some sort of weird young adult limbo? So here's Proverbs 29:18. It says, where there is no vision or revelation, the people cast off restraint, but happy is he who keeps the law. 2 Timothy 2:4 says, no soldier in active service that is engaged in warfare entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. So Paul is talking to individuals in the early church that were very committed and they were very kingdom-minded. And he's telling them, you're like a soldier that is working in the kingdom of God and in the army of God. And so you don't want to get so entangled in the affairs of everyday life that you lose focus as a soldier of the King of Kings. So young adults need to understand that if you're going to be single for the next 8, 10, even 15 years, what are you going to do? And I will guarantee you, some of y'all are going, I don't know what I'm going to do because my clock's ticking and I don't know how I'm going to resolve this. I don't know how you're going to resolve that either. But there are ways to resolve it. And young adults have a unique opportunity. It's a period of time in which you're single and you have a mobility about you, where you can do things with a sense of throw caution to the wind a bit. You could go into the mission field, you could do different things, you can serve in the church in a way that other people can't, where it's much more encumbering. There's all kinds of obstacles and things that hinder. And so Paul addresses this. There's a rhythm in life. And so you have to understand that during that single period, what does God want to do with you during that time? What does he want to accomplish through you during this time? It's a unique period of your life. I'm going to give you a few examples of people that actually got married and settled down later in life. Some of them I know personally. Rebecca St. James was 34 when she was married in 2011. Carrie Job was 33 when she was married in 2014. C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia and so forth, but a great philosopher and apologist, was married when he was 58 years old. Doug Stringer, who's a friend of mine, who is an amazing leader and ministry leader. He was 52 when he was married. He's the one on the bottom right. I think if I were to ask Doug, and I never have, but I should have said, as long as it was for you to wait, was it worth it when you met her? And I'm going to bet you anything that he'd say yes. He also gained a daughter in that transaction. And he had many years as he was exposed to all these different prophets, prophetesses, people in the body of Christ that felt like they could see the Lord working in him. And they would say, Doug, we can see it. It's coming right around the corner. She's coming. The Lord's going to bring her. He'd say, well, 10 years later, he'd be looking around that corner. Nothing would happen. Nothing's taking place. Bill Word, friend of mine here in the city, top middle, 62 years old, married for the first time, and in love like you can't even imagine. I had him give me a copy of his wedding vows because they were so phenomenal. These men and women of God, all of them that I know of, they served the Lord with passion and deep conviction. And they didn't sit around moping thinking, how am I going to be utilized? So understand the place that you're in right now. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says, Paul is writing single people. He says, I want you to be without care. He who is single cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife, or how they may please their husband. He has both. That you may serve the Lord without distraction. What he's saying is that, listen, single people, you're in a unique point in your life where you can serve with abandonment. And it's a temporary period. One day it will change. It will shift. Are you utilizing that? Are you taking advantage of that? So when we talk about calling, do you have a sense of direction about your life? Some people say, well, I'm going to be military. I'm going to go in the Navy. I'm going to be a pilot, and I'm going to fly off aircraft carriers and whatever. Okay, somebody else may say, I just know I'm going to be in law enforcement. That's my career. That's where I'm headed. And some people may say, well, I'm meant to be a foreign missionary. I'm going to go into, Guatemala or Peru or some other place. And I want to, that's where I'm going to live many years of my life. And I'll just tell you right now that the person that individual marries needs to be in 100% at peace. Being in those unique lifestyles, being a police officer is very stressful. And I had a young lady, I had a young man years ago that were part of our ministry, and he had an interest in a young lady. She had already moved away. They were college students here. He was actually a pilot, a student pilot here. And so he finally reached out to her. They kind of, they were it was very complicated. They're trying to, figure it out. And so finally he realizes, she would be an awesome wife. I'm just going to go for it. And you know what she did at that time? And she crushed on him bad. That's why you have to give time. You have to let seasons move a little bit, because the crushes aren't permanent. So when he finally reached out to her, she said, I really like you and I respect you. And if it were some other circumstance, I would be wanting to pursue this. But because you are planning to be a Navy aviator, that is not the life I'm prepared to live. And that's not the kind of life I want for my family. And so she walked away. So that was wise, because she understood realities. And a lot of times we're just barreling into these. I knew a guy that was a missionary, and I forgot what country it was. And he felt called, and he was there and for years and years. But his wife was never in agreement. She never supported him. She hated every minute. But they got married, and they were miserable for decades. By the time I met them, he was leaving the mission field, and they were now in their probably 60s. That needed to have been worked out before they got married. So hearing God's voice, it can be really tricky, especially in relationships where we're not principle-driven first. We've got to get the obvious out of the way, and that's the principles. Once you've got all the principles lined up and everything looks good, are we really hearing the Lord? So you've taken an honest look at character, how they practice their faith. You listen to the voices of people around you, and they're, so you've kind of gone through those hoops. And now, but what is the Lord saying? Even immoral relationships, when they're happening, can seem divine. They can seem inspired. There's a seduction to the romance itself. And people suspend judgment. So falling in love with the idea of getting married can really distract from actually hearing the Lord and what He's saying. Especially if we're ignoring big practical issues. So I want you to, so the way it happened, so you're going to discern, okay, what is the Lord saying? What is His will? The way it happened, it had to be God. No, it didn't. If you're just going to let circumstances dictate the voice of God, then that's shallow and immature. I prayed and asked God to take it away, but it wouldn't go away. That has nothing to do with what the Lord's saying. It must be God because this is what I prayed for. Nope. I prayed that the next person to speak to me as a sign would be the one. Now you say, well, that's really stupid, but I'm telling you, people will do really dumb things. So they'll come into a young adult fellowship and say, well, the first girl that talks to me probably is the one. Like some fleece or some destiny, like some test. No. None of these have anything to do with God. So Rebecca and Isaac, I'm going to go through this quick, but basically, if you read the story and how Rebecca met her husband Isaac, it's a really amazing story, but embedded in that story, there were 8 principles that are embedded in this short story about how they met. I'm just going to go through I'll read this and I'll go through the principles. So, behold, here I stand by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your pitcher that I may drink. And she says, drink, and I will also give your camels a drink. Let her be the one. Now, why was that? This was not like the first person that talks to me. I want you to get this. This is all within a framework. So, number one, he respected and involved his parents from the very beginning. She had a history of purity. She was a virgin. She was of like faith. See, all these principles are in place. She was of like age. They had a similar season of life that they're living in. She was from the same culture, the same family. There was a character test. The character test was this one where she said, no, but let me water your camels as well. And he had a lot of camels. He had a whole caravan. So she's not doing the minimum to get by. This is a hard-working, industrious young woman. And so she naturally served with excellence rather than the minimum to get by. She had a willingness, he had a willingness to walk away if the standards weren't met. The role of prayer was central to the entire process. Those are principles of Rebecca. If you want to read that and study it, I would encourage it in Genesis 24. There's a balance of principle and a clear understanding of the deal breakers and seeking God. It all has to be in combination, not just, the Lord's, I'm not going to be able to finish what I have, but I want you to, let's go ahead and see that clip.
Merry Christmas.
Nice coat. Merry Christmas to you too. You're beautiful. Will you marry me? I love you.
Nice coat. I don't want any trouble. Oh! Let's go.
Probably let that run longer. The main thing is I wanted you to see an illustration of a crush. The guy would walk by her booth every single day, and she was just like crushing so bad, but she had no idea who he was. It was a crush at a distance. And so it had no relevance. Of course, as the show unfolds, it was a fun show. It's called While You Were Sleeping. Fun movie. But hearing the Lord has nothing to do with the crush or how you feel in that sense. But I want you to understand, if you're going to hear the voice of God, I'm going to give you some quick principles. Probably should do some more teaching on this later. Number one, if you believe someone is his choice for you, then you want to know the Lord, you want to hear what He's saying, then these conditions need to be met. Number one, do you spend time with God? I mean, one-on-one, do you spend time with Him? Do you know His Word? Do you study the Scripture? Or you're a man and woman of God where He would be able to speak to you and you would know it was Him? Are you being honest with God? Have you learned by experience to recognize the texture and flavor of the actual voice of God? Do you listen? You have to listen for Him. Do you believe that He will actually speak to you? You have to have faith and approach Him. Recognize that He will speak to you in different ways. So, I mean, again, I could spend some time. We could do some teaching on this. Maybe I will before the end of this semester. But I had a young lady in my church many years ago, and she believed that God spoke to her. The young man, they'd been kind of going back and forth in this relationship, and they were needing to resolve it. And it was very complicated, but it came to a point where she felt, and I think the Lord probably did speak to her, but she had a very clear voice speak to her and said, "He will propose to you today." So did he? He did. He came with a proposal. But hearing that direction, anticipating it, did not give her direction of what to do with the proposal. So the proposal came, and she said yes on the assumption that that meant, because God told her He was going to do it, that therefore assumes it must be a yes. It should have been a no. It was all wrong. And that marriage never happened. She ended up marrying somebody else, a wonderful family. I'm still in touch with them, know who they are. Okay, so you may even know him. So, He will propose to you today did not mean yes. It was actually a no. She should have taken that time to go, "Lord, like David, should I pursue the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?" Her question should have been, okay, so He's going to propose to me. What does that mean? Jeanette heard the Lord speak to her very clearly. And He said to her, she must have been about 17, right? He said to her, 5 years from now, you'll marry a preacher. I didn't look like much of a preacher, but she married me at the time. But it was very accurate. Even with all her, her journey during that 5-year period, here and there and all this, and seeking for fellowship and wanting to grow in the Lord, and she had her own challenges. But in the end, the Lord ordered my steps. So what's interesting is the year the Lord spoke to her, maybe the month, maybe the week, I don't know, was the year I was saved. So when I got saved and I began to walk with the Lord, it set something in motion. And when it set that in motion, it set something in motion in her heart as well. And that's where we have to step back and say, hey, this is a realm of faith. It's not just what I want or what I think is best or whatever. She was submitted to God. I was submitted to God. And it's not like she came up to me and said, the Lord spoke to me and said, 5 years from now I'm going to marry a preacher, so you better become a preacher quick because I want to marry you. That's not the way it worked. Okay, it's not like, oh man, I'm feeling the pressure now, I've got to become a preacher. I was a leader in our fellowship at the time in campus, so it wasn't untenable. But I'm trying to give you examples of where the Lord does speak, and He does speak. The highest reason for getting married, what is it? What would be the most virtuous motive that you could possibly have for getting married? Genesis 2:18 says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him.'" So here's what I want you to say. I'm going to kind of restate this in terms of principle, embodied in principle. Listen carefully to this. When you as a single person can no longer fulfill the call of God in your life as a single person, then God will provide you a suitable helper. So you're out there serving the Lord. You're living for Him. You're in love with Jesus. You're following Him with all your heart. And you might be out there serving orphans or helping us with outreach tomorrow and with your whole heart going door to door. and overcoming your fear of talking to strangers and all those things. But you love God and you want to make a difference, and it's about His kingdom. And you can serve like that year after year after year, and it could be a point where the Lord, He is Jehovah, Yahweh, Jireh. And it means the Lord will see to it. There'll be a point where He will come in, instead of us being hungry all the time, looking over each horizon. Is this the one? Is this the one? Maybe here. Or, oh, I see that one over here. And, instead, we're serving the Lord with zeal, and we're committed to Him. And you could be at a point where you're just so focused on that, He's going, hey, I have somebody I want you to meet. Go, no, I'm busy serving the Lord. And He's got, listen up, because somebody I want you to meet. No, Lord, I'm serving you. I'm single-minded. I'm focused on the kingdom. I'm walking with Him. I'm just telling you that there are times when you are given to Him, no soldier in active service, you are committed to Him, you're serving Him, you are using that single mobility to make a difference in the kingdom of God. It's not just about you. It's not just about living your life the way you feel like living it, or feeling sorry for yourself because you haven't met somebody yet, or somebody else did, or your best friend met somebody and you didn't. And on it goes. No, we've got to shake all that stuff off and realize that you are in a strategic moment and point and period in your life where you need to be serving Him. And that's the mindset I had when I met her. And that's the mindset she had. We were committed. We were committed to serving God with all of our heart. And we were going to look to Him to put it together and make it happen. Your love and passion for serving God must be preeminent. That's the essence of Christianity. That's the essence of what it means to follow Christ. If you see your Christian faith as just a hobby that you kind of live on the side and you go to church and you have friends and you're not in love with Him, then you're lost. Are you lost here tonight? So, I was going to do this tonight, but I have to do it next week. We talk about overcoming insecurity, what it means to walk in faith and to trust God. And I've been really teaching that some tonight, but I'm gonna dovetail that into what I have to conclude with next week. One of the things I'm going to go over is a model of courtship, because ideally, as I've taught it, I think you go from friendship into engagement. I think that's really beautiful if you can do it, but a lot of couples just can't do that. And so they need an interim period that we might call courtship. And so I'm going to kind of look at that kind of as a model. I have a chart and kind of lay that out, what they look like in a practical sense, just to give you a little bit of framework. So that'll be part of next week. And then if you think of questions during the week, just write them down so we have some really great questions to discuss next week, okay?